I'm Brittany, this is Jow, and welcome to Gaywatch, where we watch gay things. Today, we get to begin Volume 1 of Guardian. I reacted to this show like 2 years ago, and ever since then, I have been hoping and looking forward to this day. This has been a very long time in coming, and we are finally here. Whoo! What? See, now I'm excited, and now I've forgotten everything that I was supposed to say, like a good YouTuber. Since I forgot, since I reacted to this show a couple of years ago, I have forgotten a lot of things. Sure, there are a lot of the bigger things that I have remembered, but plenty of stuff that I do not, which I think puts me in like a really good prime position to read the book, which I hear comes with a lot of differences anyway. So I remember enough that I'm not entirely diving in blind to this world and what's going on, but I'm not like married or overly devoted to exactly how it went, and I'm not expecting it to just go exactly how it went. And I'm fine. I'm just vibing with the changes. I'm very excited to see what the hell the changes are, because I hear varying degrees of it's a lot and it's some stuff, but none of the... I've heard a lot of things for a very long time, and as you can tell, I'm deeply excited. If you are new here, hello. We read for a couple of hours. We usually get through about 40 to 50 pages. We take a break after about an hour, so somewhere around in the middle. And please no spoilers, because there's always at least a few people in the chat who are reading along for the first time, like I am. So please no spoilers in the chat room so that everybody can be surprised at all of the things. What else? Since this is a brand new volume for a brand new reading series, tiny disclaimer about my pronunciation. At this point, I've been reading translated danmei for a little while now, but I am also deeply ADHD, and Chinese is an extremely difficult language, so is English, for English speakers. And little tiny details like looking at a letter or a couple of letters that I've been pronouncing one way my entire life, and then I now need to consistently pronounce in an entirely different way. Stuff like that takes a rather embarrassingly long time to stick for me. So I apologize for the deeply American way that I am going to inevitably mispronounce some stuff, but I very much appreciate your patience with me as I do my best, because I really do work on it, as I do my best to improve, especially starting a new to me, book series. And I'm trying to muddle my way through a bunch of brand new terms, brand new, etc., etc. You get it. Before we begin, this is my first time reading Priest. I have never read anything by her before, but I have seen most of her live action adaptations. I have seen Word of Honor. I have seen the first 8 episodes of Justice in the Dark. I have reacted to them both. I have not seen The Unknown yet, but I'm trying to make that be a thing that happens on the Patreon. So this is the first time I finally get to read her. If I have heard about MXTX the most in terms of danmei authors, Priest has been right there at number 2 as the name that I've heard the most often. And I haven't read her yet. And we get to do that now. So, we are, by the way, listen, there have been a lot of really, really gorgeous danmei covers that I've had the privilege of seeing, and I have the privilege of having on my shelf. I am also a simple bitch. Okay? You give me a cover like this, and it's going to be one of my favorite covers that I've ever seen, as in like top 5 easy, maybe even top 3. Which is saying something, because these translations come with really gorgeous covers. However, sometimes this is all you need. Or at least sometimes this is all I need. So, there is a prelude called 4 Bright Avenue, and there's really, really beautiful illustrations and art through... Is there art throughout this, actually? There is... Yeah, there's art occasionally. We will be seeing that as well. So the prelude... I'm very excited. 4 Bright Avenue starts on page 11. Okay. It was the 15th day of the 7th lunar month, and the sky was still dark. Night owls, large and small, had already returned to their nests. At this time, even the busy streets of Dragon City had begun to empty. Only the occasional insect call emerged from the bushes, sometimes there, sometimes not, making you feel nervous and jumpy. It was 2:30 a.m. Dew began to appear, and the air grew moist, sticky with humidity. Perhaps it was the wind that made it appear as if the shadow of something constantly hovered in corners. Walking down the street, it seemed like something was always behind you, staring. It was at this hour that Guo Chengcheng walked into the courtyard of 4 Bright Avenue, clutching his notice. Guo Chengcheng, having lost both of his parents at a young age, had been brought up by relatives. He had an unremarkable appearance, had stumbled through a third-rate university, and in terms of personality, was unsociable and cowardly. Unable to find a job after graduation, he had stayed at home doing nothing for the larger part of a year. Sometime later, his second uncle, who'd begun to rise through the ranks in the Ministry of Public Security, had forged the necessary connections to find a useless job for his useless nephew, to at least give him something to do. Guo Chengcheng had assumed his future would involve wearing a uniform, parking himself in the gatehouse, making a pot of tea when he got there, working 9 to 5, and welcoming and bidding farewell to visitors, until this peculiar letter of acceptance arrived. When Guo Chengcheng first received it, he thought someone had made a mistake. In very official communist red print, it declared, "Comrade Guo Chengcheng, congratulations on your acceptance into our department. Here you will enjoy the benefits of a state civil servant, while also bearing the weighty responsibility of serving the people. We hope that from this day forward, at this new job, you will be passionate about your work, respect your position, forge ahead with determination, obey your leaders, love and stand in unity with your colleagues, and contribute to the social stability and national prosperity of the country. On August 31st, the 15th day of the 7th lunar month, at 2:30 a.m., please bring your resident identity card and this letter of acceptance and report to our department in a timely manner. Address, 4 Bright Avenue, 1st floor, HR Department. On behalf of all the employees in our department, we welcome you as our good comrade. People's Republic of China, Ministry of Public Security, Special Investigations Department, X year, X month, X day." Usually, when asked to report at such a bizarre time, a normal person would assume there was a typo and would at least call ahead to confirm. But Guo Chengcheng had always been terrified of social interactions, and staying at home for more than half a year had given him a severe case of telephone phobia. Relatable. As soon as he even thought about having to call someone, he felt so stressed that he couldn't sleep for nights on end. He procrastinated in this way until midnight on the day of August 31st, and he still hadn't made the call. Deeply relatable. I didn't call about my dentist appointment until I had to reschedule my dentist appointment, and that was just today. And so, Guo Chengcheng came up with an idea that he thought would be the best of both worlds. He decided to pull an all-nighter. At 2:30 a.m., he would go take a look. If no one was there, he would go to the nearby McDonald's and make do for the night. Then, at 2:30 p.m., he would go back. Either way, he would be there at the correct time. In the middle of the night, all public transportation had stopped running. Go Chung Chung's only option was to drive himself. With much difficulty and the help of a GPS, he finally found the right place. It turned out that 4 Bright Avenue wasn't right on a street, but rather in a well-hidden courtyard. Go Chung Chung stood at the yard's gate and examined it closely for a long while before using his cell phone light to find the house number on a little plaque under the thick ivy. Below the building number, a tiny row of words carved into the rock said, Special Investigations Department. Under that was a public security logo. The landscaping inside the courtyard was very well done. At the entrance was a parking lot, and when you walked in, there was a row of pagoda trees with leaves so thick and dense they resembled a small forest. Only a narrow path was left open. After Go Chung Chung passed through, he finally saw a little building that looked like a gatehouse. Art! Okay, hang on. There really was someone inside. The lights were still on. Through the window, Go Chung Chung saw a uniformed silhouette wearing a police hat with a newspaper in hand. Once in a while, they flipped the page. Go Chung Chung took a deep breath, so nervous his hands were sweating. His empty brain didn't even have time to consider why the doorman was still at work at this hour. I'm here to report. This is my letter of acceptance. I'm here to report. This is my letter of acceptance. I'm here to report. This is my letter of acceptance. Go Chung Chung mumbled to himself like he was reciting a textbook, the lines tumbling around and around in his mouth dozens of times. He finally gritted his teeth, walked over, and knocked shakily on the gatehouse window. Before the person within had fully looked up, Go Chung Chung said, in a breath as weak as thread, as if uttering his last words, I'm here to acceptance. This is my letter of report. Confused, the middle-aged man in the gatehouse put down his newspaper and asked, Huh? In spite of his efforts, he'd still managed to mangle his lines. Go Chung Chung wanted to cry, but he didn't have the tears. The stress turned his face into a purple sweet potato. Mercifully, the man saw the letter of acceptance in his hand and immediately understood. Oh, you're our new comrade, right? How should I address you? Oh, I see it. Xiaogro. We haven't had a new person in quite a few years, so not easy finding the place, is it? Go Chung Chung finally let out the breath he had been holding. He loved people like this, warm and brimming with enthusiasm. As long as the other person's mouth was moving, he only had to nod or shake his head. No need to string words together. My precious son! Okay. Art. We have the first art. Moody as hell, by the way, this art. But look at my son. He just needs to rehearse lines and then get them wrong anyway. Which is still deeply relatable. Let me tell you, you're in luck. It just so happens that our boss is here tonight as well. Come, I'll take you to meet him. As soon as Go Chung Chung heard that, his hair stood on end. He didn't feel lucky at all. Rather, he felt a puff of misfortune float up from his head like a ghost. Go Chung Chung was good for nothing. Powerful people, such as bosses, were his greatest fear. Ever since childhood, the mere sight of a teacher made his calf cramp. If he saw the principal, even from 20 meters away, he would still change paths to avoid them. He was clearly a law-abiding citizen, but every time he saw the armed police who stood guard on National Day, he reacted like a mouse who spied a cat, which made other people throw suspicious glances his way. Meet the boss? You might as well ask him to meet a ghost. Just as cold sweat began to pour out of him in buckets, there came the sound of footsteps. A young man walked out of 4 Bright Avenue's little garden with long strides. There was a cigarette in his mouth, and his hands were... Oh, God, here we go! All right. Nobody move. Everybody calm down. All right. I'm normal. I'm very normal about him. I'm fine. A young man walked out of 4 Bright Avenue's little garden with long strides. There was a cigarette in his mouth, and his hands were shoved in his pants pockets. He was tall, with upright shoulders, thick brows, deep-set eyes, and a defined nose. He was very handsome, even if his expression was a little dark. The man's brows were furrowed, and he walked so fast that wind seemed to rise in his footsteps. The message on his face was clear. Don't block the way, don't bug me, and fuck off. In a stroke of misfortune, Go Chung Chung happened to meet his gaze and was immediately terrified by those black eyes, beautiful yet cold. His indistinct... The man does this to me. I don't know what to tell you. His instinct told him that this hot guy had a bad temper. But when the hot... Not him thinking hot-tempered hottie. All right. Woo! But when the hot-tempered hottie realized who Go Chung Chung was, he suddenly braked. In the next moment, his expression transformed, fluid as that of a master actor. That thunderous look was abruptly one of sunshine and open skies, with a kind smile that spread naturally across his face faster than one could turn a page. Along with that smile, 2 shallow dimples appeared on his cheeks. What a way to show us the double inner life he has going on. The cigarette still in his mouth made the corners of his lips seem a bit crooked. With his eyes crinkled a little, he seemed as if he might be up to no good, but just the right amount of no good, which lent him an approachable air. I have a problem with a trope that I actually haven't encountered the name of, but I have named it Bad Boy Good Man. This is kind of what I want from, the bad boy romance genre, but I never get because they're always just piece of shit humans. I need a bad boy who's a good man. That's when I start to simply collapse into a heap. That's when my knees buckle and I simply fold. And well, okay. I'm not going to be talking about spoilers until the event happens, for whatever I remember, to keep this as spoiler-free for you as possible. So, speak of the devil. Come, young man, and get to know him. This is our boss. The doorman gave Go Chung Chung a shove. Go Chung Chung stumbled forward half a step and heard the person behind him say loudly, "Director Zhao, we finally have a new coworker." Director Zhao extended a hand toward Go Chung Chung, open and friendly. "Hello, hello, the warmest of welcomes." Go Chung Chung rubbed his damp palms on his pants as if his body wasn't under his control, and then, embarrassingly, extended the wrong hand. He shrank back at once like he'd been electrocuted. The armpits and back of his t-shirt were immediately soaked in sweat. A new world map slowly took shape on his shirt. Director Zhao didn't give him a hard time. Instead, he patted Go Chung Chung's shoulder as if nothing had happened. Casual pleasantries rolled easily off his tongue. "Don't be nervous. All the comrades who work here are friendly and united. Now, today's your first day, so I should take you around and introduce you to everyone. But the thing is, today's also a special day. We're honestly just too busy. We might not be able to get you properly settled for a bit. I hope you don't mind. Later, I'll take charge of throwing you a welcome party, though it's the middle of the night now. Hey, how about this? I'll get Lao Wu to take you inside to find Wang Zheng, our head of HR, and ask her to complete all your onboarding procedures. Then you can go home and rest for the day. Come back and report tomorrow morning, okay?" Go Chung Chung nodded hastily. For all that Director Zhao had been burning with impatience before, at this moment, as they stood there and talked, his speech was unhurried. It didn't make his conversation partner feel iced out or dismissed. He was clearly very smooth when it came to dealing with people. There's something urgent I need to take care of, so I have to head off. If there's anything you need, just come and find me directly. Don't be shy. From now on, we're all family. Sorry for the trouble you took to make the trip today." Director Zhao smiled apologetically at Go Chung Chung, then waved at Lao Wu before rushing off. Lao Wu had to be a loyal fan of Director Zhao. Even though he'd just listened to a round of empty bullshit that had nothing to do with him, he was as happy as a clam. As he led Go Chengcheng into the office building, he went on and on. Our Director Zhao is young and capable, has an even temperament, and doesn't ever throw his authority around with anyone or in any situation. Go Chengcheng, still fear-struck from the misfortune of meeting his boss, was too scattered to pay proper attention as he listened. Like an echo bug, the first footnote of the series. An echo bug is a mythological creature that lives in a person's stomach and echoes everything they say. Terrifying, thanks. He could only nod agreeably. Because Go Chengcheng had always been too afraid to look people in the eye, he completely failed to notice that old Mr. Wu, who was leading the way, was as white as a sheet under the lights. His lips were blood red, the corners of his mouth extended all the way to his ears, and as his mouth opened and closed, one could see he was missing a tongue. Inside the office building, people were coming and going, and they all looked extraordinarily busy. At this point, the weirdness of the situation finally began to properly dawn on Go Chengcheng. Ordinarily, even if an urgent matter required working overtime until midnight, would the staff of the gatehouse and HR department need to keep them company? Beside him, Lao Wu explained quietly, "Shogo, don't get the wrong idea. In the future, as long as there aren't any major cases, you'll mostly be working during the day. It's just these couple of days out of the year during the 7th lunar month when we're so busy that night and day tend to blur together. You get something to show for it, though. Overtime pay is 3 times your usual, and your monthly bonus will be double, too." Go Chengcheng was even more baffled. What was this stuff about the 7th lunar month is so busy supposed to mean? Did criminals have mid-year summary meetings and experience exchange conferences too, following the lunar calendar? But fear of coming across as stupid made him too embarrassed to ask. He just nodded, confused. Lao Wu continued, "I usually work the night shift. We have a different colleague in the gatehouse during the day. You probably won't see me that often in the future." He sighed. "The truth is, I'm happy to spend time with you young people. Did you just graduate? From which school? What were you studying?" Go Chengcheng described his unimpressive academic background, ashamed. At the end, in a voice as thin as a mosquito's buzz, he added, "I'm not very good at studying." "Hiya, what do you mean? You're a university student," Lao Wu hurriedly continued. "I just love cultured young people. I'd never be able to do it. When I was younger, my family was poor. When I was 7 or 8, I attended a Sishu with the Shenshang. Ooh, Shenshang comes with a... Oh, no, sorry, it's Sishu that comes with a footnote. Oh, and Shenshang, actually. A Sishu was a private class held by rich families for their children in ancient China. These do not exist in the present day. Shenshang is an archaic word for teacher. I attended a Sishu with the Shengshang in the village for a few years. All these years later, I've pretty much given everything I've learned back to that Shenshang. I can't even read most characters. I can barely read the newspaper." "What year was this? A Sishu?" Once again, Go Chengcheng didn't understand, but he was still afraid of seeming stupid, and embarrassment kept him silent. Happily, Lao Wu said, "Here we are." Go Chengcheng looked up to see the Department of Human Resources in large text on the door, written in red on a white background. The red struck him as off somehow, but he had trouble putting a finger on why. After giving the words a long stare, it suddenly clicked that rusty red was the color of dried blood. Standing beside Go Chengcheng, Lao Wu knocked on the door. "Is Xiaowang here? I brought a new comrade who will be joining us. Can we bother you for a second to complete the onboarding process?" After a beat of silence, an airy female voice came from inside. Coming." The voice seemed awfully distant, but also as if it was floating right by his ear. When Go Chengcheng heard it, he shivered reflexively. A chill brushed the nape of his neck. But Lao Wu, seemingly oblivious, chattered on. "I'm so sorry, Xiaogo. Making you come all this way in the middle of the night. But there's no helping it. Our Xiaowang is just like me. We can only work the night shift, so all the new employment procedures need to be done at this time." Wait. What did he mean they could only work the night shift? Why couldn't they work during the day? A fresh layer of icy sweat gushed out of Go Chengcheng's back. Trembling with fright, he finally steeled his nerves and swept his eyes across the passing employees. With a single glance, he saw a person wearing a uniform float past him, his feet unmistakably not touching the ground. Or rather, he didn't have feet. The door to the office creaked open in front of them, the hinges emitting a hoarse moan. A young woman in a white dress appeared. In a wisp of a voice that made Go Cheng Chung erupt in goosebumps, she said, "Did you bring your letter of acceptance and your ID?" Cold, gloomy wind billowed out from the office. Go Cheng Chung's heart felt like it was suspended in his throat, no longer beating. He held his breath and looked up slowly. His gaze slid across the white dress, unsullied by even a single speck of dust, and finally landed on the girl's bare neck. A gurgling noise rose from Go Cheng Chung's throat as if he were being choked, mouth agape, eyes so wide that they threatened to fall out. He took a step back. Fear coursed through him. Upon closer inspection, he saw what looked like a red thread around the woman's neck. But it was no accessory. It lay too close to her skin. Rather, it was a tight line of stitches that held her head to her neck. A frigid hand came to rest on his shoulder. From right by his ear, Lao Wu's voice said, "Hey, Xiaogo, what's wrong?" Go Cheng Chung whipped his head around to stare directly at Lao Wu's face, a face that looked as if it were made from papier-mâché, with a large bloody mouth that reached his ears. Earlier, Go Cheng Chung had foolishly thought that meeting his boss would be worse than meeting a ghost, and now he was suffering the consequences of his words. Tonight, he'd not only met his boss, he'd met some real ghosts. His dear uncle truly had found him just the loveliest, most extraordinary job. That's the end of the prelude. Now we begin, apparently, Arc 1, which is called Reincarnation Dial. And now we arrive at Chapter 1, and we're on page 25. What really, Priest is my third danmei author, who I've picked up now. Yes. And something I have definitely noticed across all three is that there seems to be a great priority on clarity and clarity of the prose. Everything is always so very clear and clearly worded and communicated, and one thing after another, one action. Everything is just very extremely clear. And I appreciate that as a writer myself who went way too long in the writing community and the writing craft and in learning and everything and writing myself. Went way too long into that process before I really heard anybody mention clarity, which is, in my opinion, the most important part. And so to see this, yet another banger translation, by the way. This translation's ridiculous. To see yet another Chinese author just be so crystal clear in everything is so nice. And is a real bedrock of just really good functional prose. But they're not just functional. There's also a really good... I won't bore you with writery stuff. I promise. It's impressive is what I mean. An exceptional display of the fundamentals. Just really, really good, rock solid writing. Chapter 1. The street lights were no brighter than fireflies. They did little to illuminate the night through which a girl fled, darting across the uneven cobblestones. She suddenly tripped and fell, knees slamming into the ground. Fingers twisting nervously in her shirt, Li Qian gasped for air. The summer night was so humid that it was like trying to breathe inside a steamer basket. All she could hear was the thunder of her own heart and the sound of approaching footsteps. That rustling could only come from old, soft-soled fabric shoes. There was a sluggishness to the steps, a shuffling that suggested an elderly person whose legs were no longer what they'd once been. She whipped her head around, but other than tiny bugs flitting randomly under the light, there was nothing behind her. Li Qian was a pretty girl with delicate features, but at the moment her hair was a mess. Much of it had come loose and was plastered to her skin with sweat. Her lips were as pale as her face. No one could be beautiful under the circumstances, not even her. Her expression slowly contorted into something strange, a look of fear, or perhaps resentment. She leapt up. "Don't even think of following me." Teeth gritted, she snarled. "I shook you off once and I can do it again." The footsteps stopped. Li Qian rolled up her sleeves. Her pale arms prickled with goosebumps despite the summer heat and humidity, as if she was chilled by something invisible. She snatched up a brick from the ground. The inescapable sound of the footsteps all around her felt like rot spreading through her bones. There could be nothing more petrifying than seeing nothing. Li Qian started screaming, flailing the brick around in a panic. Sorry, I was thrown off by the unbelievable rightness of seeing nothing. Flailing the brick around in a panic, it grew heavier and heavier, its rough surface rubbing her palm raw. Exhaustion spread black spots across her vision. Gasping, she bent over, leaning her weight on her knees. Her gaze drifted to the ground. Her pupils immediately contracted and her whole body began to shake. The brick dropped from her hand onto her toes, exposed in her sandals, but she seemed not to notice. With great effort, she backed up a few steps, then sat down hard as her legs gave out. The shadow! She was right in front of the street lamp. How could there be such a clear shadow in the pool of light it cast? It was like a splash of ink on the ground. Who knew how long it had been there, watching her? Li Qian lay paralyzed, but the shadow remained upright. Are you guilty? If not, why are you afraid of the shadow? She thought she heard a sharp laugh. That's a scene break. Early in the morning, before 5 a.m., the phone on the bedside table rang as if trying to wake the dead. Zhao Yunlan had worked all night. After getting home, he hadn't even undressed, just rolled straight into bed. It felt as if he'd barely drifted off before being dragged back to consciousness. Expressionless, he opened his eyes. His heavy lids accentuated them, making his double eyelids even more pronounced. He stared at the ceiling with something like hate. 3 seconds later, like a corpse reanimated, he finally I love all the ghost talk, considering we're dealing with, like, real ghosts and shit. 3 seconds later, like a corpse reanimated, he finally lurched upright. His head felt like it was full of glue, but he managed to grab his phone from the bedside table. To say Zhao Yunlan's apartment was as messy as a doghouse would be a grave insult to dogs everywhere. Clothes were strewn all over the bed and floor. It was impossible to tell whether he planned to wash or wear them. All manner of junk was piled on the queen-sized bed, some of it almost beyond human imagination. The lone sock draped over the corner of a laptop was one thing, and the presence of sunglasses and an umbrella wasn't wholly bizarre, but it would be a stretch to explain the tall hat folded from white paper or the huge jug of cinnabar powder. Footnote. Dealing with the supernatural or the dead often involves the use of cinnabar. Paper hats are used for funerals. Great! Thanks for that context. That's lovely. That's delightful. That's not sad in the slightest. All of this clutter had been pushed into a heap, leaving only a nest big enough for one person to lie in, and he'd probably dug out that space just before lying down. Zhao Yunlan answered the call, looking ready to unleash a torrent of abuse. What now? On the other end of the line, Wang Zheng got right to the point. Director Zhao, there's been a death. When? Last night or early this morning? Where? University Street. Zhao Yunlan rubbed his face, expression savage. Send Lao Chu to check it out. Chu Shuji? Ah! Chu Shuji went to Shangxi for a work trip. What about Lin Jing? He was lent to the netherworld. Then Zhuheng. No, scratch that. It was the full moon yesterday, so she asked for leave. Who's left? Me? Wang Zheng said, but it's nearly sunrise, so my shift is ending soon. Otherwise, there's Da Qing and the new intern, Go Changcheng. Zhao Yunlan yawned and said listlessly, have Da Qing go with the intern to take a look. Let the kid get his feet wet. Almost inflectionless, Wang Zheng said. Intern Go Changcheng can't go anywhere just now. When he came to report last night, he passed out from terror. He may simply be asleep now rather than unconscious, but regardless, he still hasn't woken up. Zhao Yunlan paused at that. Then he asked, what scared him into passing out? Lao Wu and I. Wang Zheng gave a scrupulous report, concluding with, I told you ages ago to have a professional funeral store make Lao Wu a proper body. Ju Hong's hands are clumsier than her feet. Even the beanbag she sews leaks everywhere. No paper mache person she makes, thanks for that, will ever pass for human. Zhao Yunlan sat silently on the edge of his bed. Recognizing his lack of available minions, all he could do was sigh sleepily. Alrighty, I'll be there shortly for a look. Tell Da-Ching, emphasis, syllable, trying to get it right, to wait for me. Actually, that's why I have a pen here, so I can write that down. Woo, that's an I, not a U. Thank you. After hanging up, he yelled in frustration, swore, then took 3 minutes to wash up before speeding toward University Street. As Zhao Yunlan passed through the intersection and decelerated, a black shadow descended from the sky. Like a grenade, a round animal slammed into the hood of his car, nearly denting it. The metal clanged with the impact. Zhao Yunlan immediately stomped on the brakes, sucking a sharp breath through his teeth. He stuck his head out the window. "This is a motor vehicle, sir, not your litter box. Could you please take it easy?" Perched on the hood was an utterly black cat. Atop the mere suggestion of a neck was a face like a persimmon. His body was a perfect sphere. With great effort, he sucked in his belly while folding his hind legs beneath him. Only after overcoming those challenges could he extend his front legs, short compared to his round belly, and assume a dignified sitting pose. This big kitty with his persimmon face took a quick look all around. Seeing no one nearby, his whiskers quivered as he slowly opened his mouth. A rather deep male voice emerged. "Cut the bullshit and get out here. Can't you smell it?" The smell in the air was indeed unspeakably disgusting. Zhao Yunlan parked on the side of the road and got out, then immediately covered his nose. Brow furrowed, he asked, "What is this stink? Did you let one loose?" The massive black cat ignored him and jumped down, hitting the ground with the force of a thunderbolt. Wiggling his butt directly at Zhao Yunlan, he prowled on ahead, radiating majesty and confidence. Quite a few police cars were already parked on the other side of the road. Caution tape had been slapped across the entrance of a narrow alley. Rummaging in his pocket, Zhao Yunlan finally found a tattered-up work ID. The young officer by the caution tape had his back to the crime scene, looking green around the gills. He took the ID and barely glanced at it before shoving it against Zhao Yunlan's chest and making a dash for the wall. He leaned against it and threw up, unable to bear it anymore. Zhao Yunlan grasped at his bird's nest hair, which looked like a horde of animals had stampeded through it. "Is my beautiful ID photo that revolting?" The black cat had gone a few steps ahead. Seeing Zhao Yunlan dilly-dallying, he had to turn back, giving him a long meow. His fur stood on end. Okay, don't rush me. The smell could kill you from 10 paces. Zhao Yunlan ducked under the caution tape. As soon as he was on the other side, someone hurried over to greet them. Voice muffled by the tissue clamped over his nose, he asked, "Are you the comrade from the Special Investigations Department?" Within the public security system was a mysterious department called the Special Investigations Department. It was no low-level division, but no one knew exactly what those people did or what their procedures were. The simple fact was, whenever someone from the Special Investigations Department showed up, it meant the order had come directly from above, and there was no room for argument. But if they didn't come, there was no way to find them. They were within the public security system, but in many ways independent from it. The organization was very secretive, with no transparency as to what they did or why. Without special permission, the media couldn't even catch a glimpse of the SID, never mind get close enough to interview them. No one knew what their criminal procedures were or how they built their indictments. The only thing that was clear was that once a case was handed to them, it vanished into a black box. Nothing was shared with the public but the case's conclusion, shrouded in mystery. And sometimes the staff of the SID were even more mysterious than the work they did. Their case reports were comprehensive, detailing the cause, the course of events, the conclusion, the suspect's identity, and the circumstances that led to apprehending the perpetrators. Every step they'd taken was plainly laid out with meticulous logic and clear formatting. There was no fault to be found. The only problem was that by the time any given case was closed, the culprits were all dead. The officer in charge at this particular crime scene was an older man by the name of Yang. He shook Zhao Yunlan's hand curiously, looking him up and down. "What do I call you?" he asked politely. "My name's Zhao Yunlan. Please, just call me Xiao Zhao." This was a shock for Lao Yang, who had certainly not expected the current SID director to make an appearance. Movement just totally derailed me there. Director Zhao looked to be about 30 years old, which was a little young for the job. He was tall, lean, and very good looking, but his shirt was wrinkled, its top 2 buttons undone, and only half of the hem tucked into his pants. Between that and the veritable bird's nest on his head, he was rather unkempt. Lao Yang exclaimed, "Oh, you're Director Zhao. Well, why, I should have realized. I just didn't expect such a young, promising leader." Zhao Yunlan, accustomed to this reaction, smoothly offered a few pleasantries in return. At the sound of a meow, Lao Yang looked down, barely in time to see a dark shadow race up to Zhao Yunlan's shoulders via his pant leg. It was a black cat with deep green eyes. A green-eyed black cat materializing at a murder scene should have been extremely creepy. But this potentially creepy cat bro was so plump that he seemed more like a lucky cat beckoning fortune in. The overall effect was that Director Zhao's head seemed on the verge of being pushed off his shoulders, which gave the cat a bit of a comical air. Lao Yang and the cat stared at each other for some time. This is... Zhao Yunlan awkwardly hugged up his pants, which had nearly been dragged down by the cat's weight. Tilting his head, he laughed dryly. "This is our director, Kitty. Ordinarily, he supervises our work very closely, and since he saw us goofing off and chatting, he's unhappy now." Lao Yang was at a loss. The black cat meowed smugly, his long tail swishing impatiently. When he lifted his head, Zhao Yunlan immediately understood. He grasped a little tag from around the cat's neck and worked it free from the rolls of fat to show Lao Yang, "This is a special permit from the SID. It's exactly like our work ID, giving him access to any crime scene. Don't worry, he's an old cat. He won't cause any trouble." Still silent, Lao Yang was starting to think there was bullshit afoot. After Lao Yang made a round of calls confirming that the man with the bird's nest head and the cat weren't frauds, Zhao Yunlan and his master cat finally entered the crime scene. The closer they got, the thicker the stench became. A girl's corpse lay inside the narrow alley, wearing a shirt that said Dragon City University Orientation. Her eyes were wide and unfocused, her limbs were splayed out, and her mouth was agape. Her abdomen had been sliced open by a sharp implement, and the organs had been removed, leaving her like a big doll with its stuffing pulled out. Lao Yang had the tissue back over his nose, his features twisted. The fat cat on Zhao Yunlan's shoulder uttered a long howl, jumped to the ground, and circled the corpse twice. He then stopped at a spot and sat, looking up at Zhao Yunlan. He seemed almost as well trained as a drug dog. Zhao Yunlan walked over, putting on wrinkled gloves pulled from his pants pocket. He felt around the area where the cat sat, then carefully lifted one of the corpse's arms. Lao Yang craned his neck. On the ground, where it had been hidden by the arm, was half a bloody handprint. The handprint was starkly inhuman. The palm was as small as a child's, but the fingers were at least 20 centimeters long. Lao Yang, a lifelong officer, had never seen such a thing. As he stared in shock, he heard Zhao Yunlan say in an unusually serious voice, "As of now, the Special Investigations Department is taking charge of this case. Follow-up procedures will be completed within 2 business days." Before Lao Yang could answer, Zhao Yunlan pointed at a small, dilapidated door on the wall next to them. And what might this be? Well, that was the end of the chapter. We're on page 35 for chapter 2, and given what time it is, let me see just how long this is. Yeah, it's just another 10-page thing, so we'll read this before we take the break real quick. Chapter 2. This was a side door on Dragon City University's perimeter wall. Dragon City University was a renowned institution with a long history. Like many other schools, DCU had relocated its main campus to the city's outskirts. Within the city proper, where land was worth more than gold, only a fraction of the administration offices and a few graduate departments remained on the old campus. As a result, the few students there were outnumbered by tourists. Zhao Yunlan had been standing at the entrance to a dorm building holding the black cat for half an hour when Go Changcheng finally arrived. That was when Zhao Yunlan began to realize that the intern he had so hastily greeted the night before was a useless embarrassment. Go Changcheng shrank into himself when he walked, shoulders hunched. His head was always down as if he was ashamed, and his hair nearly covered his eyes. All of this, along with his funeral all-black attire, made him seem lethargic. He resembled nothing so much as a mushroom swaying in the breeze. Narrowing his eyes, Zhao Yunlan whispered to the cat in his arms, "What do you think?" Wang Cheng said to him. "You think you'd been forced into a life of crime." The black cat yawned lazily. "Mama Zhao, you're exaggerating." Mama Zhao. Go Changcheng shuffled up to them, for all the world as if he'd been kidnapped and dragged into the mountains to be a bandit's bride. On the verge of tears, he mumbled, "You told me to meet you at the crime scene." Very deliberately, Zhao Yunlan asked, "Sorry, who did you say sent you? Can you speak up, or do we need to get you a microphone?" Go Changcheng shuddered violently. Wong. Footnote. The Chinese onomatopoeia for a dog barking is Wong Wong. Okay. Because Go Changcheng sounds like he's barking, Da Qing responds with a sarcastic meow. Aha. Meow. Da Qing put in. Disappointment darkened Zhao Yunlan's mood. The previous night, he'd brushed past Go Changcheng without registering that his new employee could barely string a sentence together. He went through the motions in a tone that didn't quite sound sincere. "You already knew that what we saw at the crime scene, right? This is the dorm the victim lived in. Come with me and we'll take a look." He turned and entered the dorm as he spoke, but didn't hear anyone coming in behind him. Looking back, he saw that Go Changcheng's eyes had locked on to the fierce-looking auntie who oversaw the dorm. Fear had struck Go Changcheng silent and rooted him in place. Zhao Yunlan could only rein in his temper and gesture patiently, as if calling to a dog. "Why are you standing at the door like an idiot? I already spoke to her. You don't need to announce yourself. Just come in." It would have been better if he'd kept his mouth shut. As soon as Go Changcheng heard, he reflexively straightened up and announced himself. "I'm here!" Then realizing he'd made a fool of himself, he went completely stiff. He became a blushing plank in the entryway. This time, Zhao Yunlan bit his tongue. His first impression of the intern could be best summed up as, "What a dumbass." My poor son. Inside the girls' dorm, room 202 was a standard double. The black cat jumped down from Zhao Yunlan's arms and carefully inspected under the bed and cabinet, then leaped to the windowsill where he lowered his head and sniffed. Suddenly, he turned his head and sneezed heavily. Go Changcheng had suffered a great scare the night before, but now, after some observation, he had confirmed that his attractive boss did in fact throw a shadow in daylight. Mustering up the courage to study Zhao Yunlan more closely, he concluded that, although the overnight shift had done a number on Zhao Yunlan's appearance, he might be genuinely human. Thus reassured, he finally relaxed a little and stuck close to his boss's heels, like a little tail. Zhao Yunlan reached into the box of cigarettes in his pocket and took one with the ease of long practice. Putting it between his lips, he lit it, then went to the window and patted the cat's backside in a signal to move over. Bending toward the windowsill, he squinted and exhaled a puff of smoke. The smoke's smell wasn't pungent. It held the note of mint and a refreshing herbal scent, and combined with his subtle cologne, it had a relaxing effect. It took a special kind of talent to be so ragged, and yet so provocative. "Look," he said. Go Changcheng obediently looked down. A shudder racked him at the sight of a print on what had been an unmarked down windowsill. The handprint of a human skeleton. Zhao Yunlan leaned closer and sniffed it calmly. There isn't any stench. Only an old, experienced cat would be able to smell it. The black cat's mouth opened. So it wasn't this? Suddenly hearing the cat speak, Go Changcheng whipped his head around hard enough that his neck cracked. Zhao Yunlan shook his head within the smoke, looking pensive. Disregarding Go Changcheng entirely, he turned to the cat and said, "I'm afraid not. Things that can kill don't smell like this." As he pushed the window open, his gaze inadvertently fell on Go Changcheng, who was so pale that he seemed like he might drift away. It was clear that his entire view of the world had been toppled and his nerves were tying themselves in a bow. Zhao Yunlan couldn't help wanting to mess with him. Okay, kid, get up here and see what's outside the window. Go Chengcheng replied. What do you mean, Smarten up, young man, hurry. Go Chengcheng swallowed hard. He stuck his head out and realized just how high up the second floor was, and his knees went weak. But the thought of turning to Zhao Yunlan and saying, I'm too scared, was clearly even further beyond his courage and communication ability. Ultimately, the poor child was caught between a rock and a hard place. His boss was more frightening, so he could only climb onto the balcony window, slow as a snail. There he crouched, too afraid to stand up, clutching the lattice as if his life depended on it. Immobilized by fear, he found he could only move his neck. He turned his head with great effort, trembling as he surveyed his surroundings. Just then, far too clearly, he saw a reflection in the window. Instantly, every hair on his body stood on end. Terrified and panicked, he realized that the glass wasn't only reflecting him. Impossibly, a skeleton lay where he was crouched. The bones of its hand went straight through his ankle, lined up exactly with the handprint on the windowsill, and it was peering into the room. Go Chengcheng quickly looked down, but there was nothing there. For a time, he couldn't tell whether his vision or the window was lying to him. His chest went cold. Even his breathing trembled. Then the skeleton turned, meeting his gaze in the glass, and in the skull's empty eye sockets, Go Chengcheng saw what seemed to be a person. The person's head and body were covered by a cloak and wholly shrouded in black mist, and there was something in their hand. Before he could get a good look at what the person was holding, a man spoke from below. Hey, are you a student? What are you doing hanging out the window? The voice badly startled Go Chengcheng, whose nerves were already shot. In a stroke of misfortune, there was a bit of slippery moss on the windowsill. He lost his footing and fell victim to gravity. Zhao Yunlan leaped into action and made a grab for him, but only managed to catch a fistful of Go Chengcheng's helmet-like hair. Go Chengcheng screamed. In shock, Zhao Yunlan lost his grip and just let him drop. The black cat sat on the windowsill, tail a swish. Meow. Director Zhao cursed as he raced down the stairs. I can't fucking believe this. Seeing Go Chengcheng falling, the person who'd spoken up made a hurried attempt to catch him. He was a man with a lean build who, even at the height of summer, was wearing a long-sleeved shirt. He looked clean-cut and gentle, with rimless glasses that contributed to an elegant, intellectual air. He'd been holding his lesson planner, but had dropped it when he reached for Go Chengcheng. Are you all right, Tongshui? This comes with a footnote. Tongshui is a way to address a student by someone who is not close to them in contexts where using their full name would sound too blunt. It can also be attached to someone's name as a suffix, for example, Zhao Tongshui. Oh! There's art. There's art. I'm sorry. I was just summarily bitch slapped. Okay. We'll get there. Hang on. Thankfully, having only fallen from the second floor, Go Chengcheng was fine, if a bit shaken. Panicked, he turned to look at the windowsill he'd fallen from, only to find it completely empty. It was as if the skeleton hanging outside the window and the black cloaked figure in its eyes were figments of his imagination. Legs turning to jelly... Hot, Wayfarer. Hot. Entirely derailed me. Like, I'm having a hard time focusing on the words. I'm okay. I'm fine. It's fine. Where the hell are words on a page? Legs turning to jelly, Go Chengcheng plopped onto his backside. Did you twist your ankle? The bespectacled man bent down slightly to check on him. School rules strictly forbid climbing on buildings. It's too dangerous. Now, I won't give you any demerits this time. Let me take you to the school clinic. Go Chengcheng replied. No need. I'm not. Nervousness always left him tongue-tied, even less able to speak clearly than usual. He felt that he'd probably been born a useless lump of wood. Oh, honey. What path could he take through life that didn't require leeching off a partner? Ow! Damn! We've got to get this boy to stand up. No, honey. Here he was, first day on the job, and already losing his mind. Zhao Yunlan, having bolted down to the ground floor, grabbed Go Cheng Chung by the collar and yanked him upright. What he really wanted was to take off his shoes and dual wield at this precious boy's face, but with someone else present, he could only swallow his temper. He turned to the man in the glasses and extended a hand. Hello, we're from Public Security. The last name's Zhao, and with whom do I have the honor of speaking? Their gazes met, and they both froze. Out of nowhere, is he an instructor or the school hottie? Flashed across Zhao Yunlan's mind. Something flickered over the hot instructor's face. He seemed to instinctively avoid Zhao Yunlan's hand, but quickly recovered. Clearing his throat, he touched his hand to Zhao Yunlan's for the merest fleeting instant before letting go. The honor is all mine. Let me just share the art here. Take a second. It's understandable. It's fine. Yeah. The name is Shen Wei. I teach here. I'm sorry, I mistook that officer for a student staying behind for the summer. Shen Wei's hand had the chill of a corpse fresh from cold storage. Zhao Yunlan couldn't help giving him another glance, but Shen Wei refused any eye contact, using the excuse of picking up his scattered lesson plans to avoid his gaze. Zhao Yunlan began to help, and the two of them reached for the same piece of paper at the same time. Under the circumstances, one of them reaching for his own paper, the other simply trying to help, Zhao Yunlan should have been the one to withdraw. Instead, it was Shen Wei who hastily pulled back, as if burned. His lips were pale, but a trace of crimson tinted his cheekbones. Rude. His entire reaction was peculiar for a first meeting. It was as if he feared Zhao Yunlan, but it was more than that. If a criminal with a guilty conscience came face to face with a police officer, in addition to being nervous, they would try to sneak peeks at the officer's reaction, rather than fully avoiding their eyes. It was all rather baffling. Zhao Yunlan started to observe Shen Wei carefully. The world held all kinds of beauties. Jesus, we're not about to... Man, it is page 42. We are not about to go off on... Okay. Page 42, and we started on 11. The world held all kinds of beauties. Sunny, refreshing, dashing, delicate. The possibilities were endless. But there was one type, like fine porcelain, that at first glance seemed pleasant enough to look at, but not entrancing. Such gentle, elegant beauty didn't brashly demand attention, but someone with a discerning eye would be drawn in, captivated by the exquisiteness before them. That was the nature of Shen Wei's appearance. The longer you looked, the more his beauty was revealed. Zhao Yunlan had no preference between men or women, and what's more, he'd been single for a few months. Well, no shit! Holy God! Yeah. You said bisexual when you said the possibilities were endless. Okay? We been new. His suspicious gaze changed as lust crept in. Oh my god. His heart, despite the inappropriate timing, skipped a beat. Just then, the massive spherical black cat wriggled his way over to Shenwei's feet. It almost seemed like he was under the influence. After sniffing Shenwei carefully, neck extended, the cat glued himself to Shenwei's leg, meowing piteously. This lordly cat, normally gluttonous and lazy, noble and cold, had never carried out his obligations as a cat so earnestly before. Zhao Yunlan froze at the sight of him shamelessly nuzzling into Shenwei's pant leg. Deching even looked up, as if kissing up to Shenwei, and stretched his laughably short front legs towards Shenwei's knees, begging to be held. He picked up the cat, who didn't mind the chill of his touch. With a softer meow, the cat curled into a ball, purring and nuzzling against Shenwei's hands. Shenwei petted the cat's head. What an intelligent cat. Does he have a name? Yeah, Zhao Yunlan said. His name is Deching, pet name Fatty, nickname Big Dumb Fatty. The black cat yowled, fur standing on end as he scratched at Zhao Yunlan. Zhao Yunlan easily evaded his claws and scooped the cat into his own arms, giving Guo Changcheng a look. Guo Changcheng steeled himself and approached. Opening the document folder he held, he withdrew a female student's ID, trembling as he passed it to Shenwei. Speaking to a stranger was intensely difficult for him, but he said, Shenlasha, hello, could you take a look? Does this person look familiar? Shenwei pushed his glasses up, masking the faintest trace of panic and smoothing out his expression. I don't know her. I don't think she's taken any of my classes. So the rumors that something happened to a student last night are true. Zhao Yunlan studied him, alert to every micro-expression. Yes, this ID was found on the deceased. Where can we find more background information on this student, Shenlasha? Shenwei avoided his demanding gaze. You can try asking at the registrar. Where might the registrar be? Asked Zhao Yunlan immediately. Would you be so kind as to take us there? Shenwei stiffened, but Zhao Yunlan pressed on. Or is it too much trouble? Tightening his grip on his lesson plans, Shenwei paused. Finally, he reluctantly said, Follow me. I am so happy right now. We're going to take a very quick break. And I actually have a very small surprise. If you're brand new to the stream and you've never tuned into one of my reading streams before, will obviously be new to you along with everyone else. But for everyone who has seen me before, they're used to the be back later thin and dead silence while you're looking at a be back. Actually finally found some music for you guys. So my apologies if it's a little bit too quiet or a little bit too loud. I cannot accommodate every single speaker situation in the known universe, but we are going to see how this goes. This is new. Pardon any troubleshooting issues. But real quick, we are going to go on a break. This is your cue. Go to the bathroom, go grab something to eat, go stretch, do something. And I will meet you back here in just a few minutes for the second half of the reading. Hello. Welcome back. How did the music play out? Was it at a decent volume or do I need to adjust? We are on page 45 for chapter 3. Somebody asked, I saw just before I got up to go, do stuff during the break. Somebody asked if Zhao is named for Zhao Yunlan. And yes, he is. Very much so. If memory serves, I believe this is one of, if not his very, very first co-hosting appearance. There is also a mug that I have chosen for Shenwei because, of course, but he is still on the Amazon wish list. Co-hosts are really great thing to have on the wish lists alongside the books because it's usually something that I cannot justify buying on my own. But if somebody wants me to have a co-host and let me name them and potentially use them and all that jazz, then that's been a really fun way. And hilariously, Zhao got to me first, but Shenwei is still there. I already said the page and the number. I almost said chapter 45, page 3. Flip that, reverse it. Page 45, chapter 3. All right. There was no music. Of course there wasn't. I don't know why there wouldn't be. Hang on one moment. It didn't. I get to mess with that for Thursday. Great. All right. Anyway, get my face out of here. Dragon City University's original campus had been built during the Chinese Republican era, and it bore the weight of a century of history. There were ancient trees everywhere you looked, creating a canopy that practically blotted out the sky. The architecture of the school buildings hidden within dated back to the days of European concession. They seemed incredibly old and somehow desolate. Only the administrative office buildings near the west entrance had been built in recent years. They were tall enough to stand out amongst the older buildings, a sore thumb that ruined the ambiance of the campus. As soon as they entered this brand new admin building, Zhao Yunlan's eyelid twitched reflexively. The building had 18 floors. Footnote: in Chinese mythology, hell has 18 levels. Hilarious. There had been a time when some real estate developers avoided the number 18 when numbering floors for residential buildings. That's so good to hear! Only because, it makes Americans not weird about something for a frickin' change. Because we have a habit of not building 13th floors, because that's a superstitious number that we have. But as housing prices skyrocketed and the market boomed, no one could afford to care about that kind of superstition anymore. A cold, eerie draft came up from ahead. It might have just been the air conditioning. From this place on Zhao Yunlan's shoulder, Dacheng shivered, sharp claws unsheathed and hooked firmly into Zhao Yunlan's shirt. Once on the elevator, Shenwei said that student's ID said she was in the math department. Their faculty office is on the top floor. He pressed the button for the 18th floor. Out of nowhere, Zhao Yunlan asked, "Shenloshe, are you not curious about what happened?" Most people have a few questions when they stumble into something like this. Shenwei lowered his head slightly. "It's the victim who's important here," he murmured. "I'm just doing what I can to help you investigate. As for the rest of it, what matters is that you know about it. Whether I know or not isn't important." Zhao Yunlan touched the cat's back, absent-mindedly stroking the black fur. "Not many citizens are so willing to cooperate with our work these days. Our Dacheng never gets close to strangers, but he took a real shine to you." Shenwei smiled. He spoke sparingly, as if every word were as precious as gold. Anyone would do the same. Just then, as the elevator reached the 4th floor, footnote for 7, Seventh footnote. Can I speak at the top of this break? Lord. 4, which sounds like death in Chinese, is an unlucky number. Gotcha. Somebody just mentioned that 4th floor in Japan is the one that they avoid building. It suddenly shook and jolted to a halt. The overhead lights flickered twice, perhaps due to faulty wiring. Panicked, Go Cheng-chung looked up at Zhao Yunlan, but the man seemed oblivious. He didn't even blink, just continued to study Shen Wei, deep in thought. A man's voice came faintly from the intercom. Shen Laoshe, what takes you to the 18th floor? Shen Wei's expression remained unchanged. There's been an accident involving a girl from the math department. These two are police. I'm taking them up to the math department to gain a better understanding of the situation. Oh. The person speaking seemed slow to react. There was a pause before they continued, voice weak and sluggish. Okay, please be careful. He just finished speaking when everything returned to normal. The lights steadied and the halted elevator continued upward with a creak, as if nothing at all had happened. Scared, Shen Wei turned around, still only looking at Go Cheng-chung, while surreptitiously avoiding Zhao Yunlan. That was probably the building security guard. Last semester, a student died by suicide, jumping from the roof. Since then, if anyone not from the math department wants to go to the top floor, the security guard stops the elevator and asks a few questions to keep such a thing from happening again. Go Cheng-chung released the breath he was holding, looking faintly nauseated. Zhao Yunlan, however, gave the intercom a considering glance. The elevator reached its destination, shaking the whole way. The 18th floor was desolate, with not even a mosquito or gecko present to provide a spark of life. Zhao Yunlan couldn't help but sneeze a few times. Shen Wei immediately stopped. Officer Zhao, do you have a cold? There was a kind of gentlemanly righteousness to the way Shen Wei lowered his head. Just looking at him was so pleasant that it was nearly impossible to suspect him of anything. Oh no. We get dumb around hot people. Rubbing his nose, Zhao Yunlan said, No, it's just that I took one step into this hall and smelled the miserable scent of math homework. Allergies, you know. Oh, God. Shen Wei's eyes crinkled politely at the joke. Don't laugh, Zhao Yunlan said seriously. Not that I'm afraid of you laughing. When I was a student, teachers were my mortal enemies. One homeroom teacher confidently predicted that I'd grow up to be a little thug. No one ever would have imagined that I'd become a cop. But when I ran into him at a school anniversary and wanted to show off a little, guess what he said? What? Shen Wei was looking down, watching where he was going, but somehow his side profile gave the strong impression he was listening attentively. Zhao Yunlao quipped. That old cynic said, You think I was wrong, Zhao Tongshui? Look at you now, a typical thug in a uniform. Damn. Zhao Yunlan was used to dealing with all manner of people. He was chatty and articulate with a silver tongue, and now he quickly dispelled the awkward atmosphere. As the trio walked on, Zhao Yunlan and Shen Wei continued chatting, still subtly probing each other for information. The echoes of their steps rang off the walls, but hidden beneath the sound of their voices and casual laughter was another noise, the footsteps of a fourth person. Quiet steps dragged along the floor, rustling like the soft fabric shoes of an elderly person. The administrative building was constructed in a tower style. As with most such structures, an elevator stood at its center, encircled by the floor's hallways. Go Cheng-chung couldn't help noticing that Zhao Yunlan's watch was silently changing in a peculiar way. Color was spreading from its center, where the hour and minute hands met. A smudge of crimson, darker than vermilion but lighter than ruby, expanded across the watch's face like ripples on water. This metamorphosis made Zhao Yunlan's watch seem like an expensive piece of art. The metal straps buckled around his slim, pale wrist gave a strangely uncanny impression of luxury. Go Cheng-chung hesitated. In a small voice, he said, Director Zhao, your watch. What, is it turning red? Zhao Yunlan, who was walking ahead, turned back with his signature smirk. You know why? Go Cheng-chung shook his head in total honesty. Still smiling, Zhao Yunlan said, Violent ghosts like to wear red. This building's feng shui isn't very good. Something filthy could be hiding just about anywhere. Maybe that's what's being reflected. Go Cheng-chung paled as he glanced reflexively at Zhao Yunlan's watch. This time, the glass showed him a person. An old woman of average build, maybe a bit plump, dressed entirely in black, and looking expressionlessly back at him. Go Cheng Chung's footsteps stopped abruptly. But Zhao Yunlan only laughed, as if he hadn't noticed a thing. He twisted a small knob on the side of his watch, and a cloud of mist erupted within, washing the redness away in a heartbeat. When he looked again, he saw a clean men's watch of very ordinary design. Its display showed no trace of either creepy red or reflected female ghosts. Haven't you seen those balls under computer mouses that can change color? Same principle. This silly kid. You can tell him anything and he'll buy it. Zhao Yunlan abruptly stopped teasing and turned to Shen Wei. Shenlou-Ch is an intellectual who believes in atheism. I'm sure you don't believe in ghosts, do you? As the old saying goes, even the most esteemed of scholars does not speak outside the bounds of his knowledge, Shen Wei said. No one can say for certain whether or not ghosts actually exist. Personally, I think that if they exist, then they exist. If they don't, they don't. There's no need to investigate too deeply. Ask not of the people, but of ghosts and gods was only done by incompetent rulers in ancient times. If people can't even figure out their own problems, isn't it an absurd waste of time to wonder whether ghosts and gods exist? He spoke in a very scholarly manner, but his answers danced smoothly around the question. Seeing no use in probing further, Zhao Yunlan smiled and moved on as if nothing had happened. Shenlou-Ch, you teach the humanities? I teach language classes as well as a few humanities electives. Ah, that explains it. You know, I heard from a friend in real estate that residential buildings are rarely built like this anymore. Nowadays, it's usually only commercial office buildings over 100 meters tall that are built in this tower style. Apart from how hard they are to clean, they don't have open space to allow for natural lighting, so they aren't too comfortable to live in. I think that's the meaning of bad feng shui. Zhao Yunlan took his pack of cigarettes from his breast pocket and shook it. Oh, right. Is smoking allowed here? Do you mind? Shen Wei shook his head. Zhao Yunlan flicked the pack with one hand, his other hand in his pocket, and fished a cigarette out with his lips. Eyes slightly downcast, he lit it. A few seconds later, he exhaled a cloud of white smoke with the casual air of an experienced smoker. Shen Wei had seemed determined not to speak much, but evidently this was the final straw. Brows furrowed, he said, "Smoking and drinking are bad for your health, and Officer Zhao is still so young. It's best to do such things in moderation." Zhao Yunlan smiled, but didn't respond. Hidden by the cloud of smoke, his expression was impossible to make out. Fine ash fell from the cigarette's tip. Intentionally or not, some of it landed on Shen Wei's shadow. Zhao Yunlan's gaze swept across the floor, and then he wafted the smoke back toward himself. In our field, day and night run together sometimes. It's a bit embarrassing to admit, but that does make it easy to develop bad habits. It seemed Shen Wei wanted to say something else, but as the words reached his lips, he bit them back forcefully. When he spoke again, it was on another topic entirely. There aren't many departments on the old campus, so there isn't much faculty presence. On all 18 floors here, only the south-facing offices are in use. Most of the other rooms are empty. Turn here, and you'll reach your destination. Mold and moss liked to grow in lonely, empty corners, but so did other things. For whatever reason, the looping hallway of the building didn't have curved corners. Instead, it had abrupt, sharp angles, which were a huge taboo in feng shui. Superstition aside, it was visually jarring, and anyone approaching a turn had no view at all of what was around the corner. If two people happened to be walking toward the same corner from opposite directions, they would be on a collision course. Shen Wei led the way, Zhao Yunlan followed closely behind, holding the cat, and Go Cheng Chung brought up the rear. As they came toward a corner, Go Cheng Chung had the sudden feeling that something was about to lash out of those dark shadows. He could no longer pay attention to the conversation, focused only on that corner ahead. There, dim light shone through a window that was open at a very uncomfortable angle. Its lattice shadow spread across the floor in a stark delineation of light and darkness. At the edge of that shadow, Go Cheng Chung noticed something moving, as if a person were hidden there and stealthily poking their head out, and then a shape like a hand emerged. The shadow hand's fingers suddenly splayed wide, making a fierce grab for Shen Wei's feet. Shen Wei appeared oblivious, but Zhao Yunlan grabbed his arm and dragged him back half a step. Right. I just remembered something, Zhao Yunlan said, tapping some cigarette ash into the shadow. The shadowy hand recoiled as if burned. Where is my mind? We got this case in a rush, so I need to speak to the chancellor or their administrative assistant about what the school needs to do to cooperate. Would you be able to help us get in touch? Now, finally, Shenwei looked at him. The corners of the professor's eyes gently tapered into a line, slender and elegant, like a delicate brushstroke trailing off. Prose. Okay. The way his gaze slanted out through his glasses verged on seductive in an otherworldly way. He could have stepped out of a supernatural tale, like a scholar who stole the heart of a female ghost in whose image she'd lovingly captured in ink. In such stories, even if the subject of the portrait was as clear as the moon and as smooth as jade, this image of them would still inevitably be tainted by the artist's sinful aura. Hang on. Back up. Okay. In such stories, even if the subject of the portrait was as clear as the moon and as smooth as jade, this image of them would still inevitably be tainted by the artist's sinful aura. What in the analogy is that? Rude, priest. That was rude. Shenwei looked down, smiling shyly. The dark seductiveness had evaporated. You're right. I really can't be of any help here, and I might even be a hindrance. The offices on the southern wall are all the math department. You can just go in and inquire. I'll go speak to the chancellor. Thanks. Zhao Yunlan extended the hand he'd been keeping in his pants pocket and shook Shenwei's hand with a smile. After an unremarkable goodbye, he waved Go Chang-chung along and strode arrogantly into the office area, intern in tow. For some reason, after a few steps, Go Chang-chung looked back. Shenwei had yet to take even a single step from the spot. He'd removed his glasses and was absent-mindedly wiping them with the corner of his shirt. In the dim hallway, his shadow stretched out, long against the floor, looking lonely and dejected. The eyes that had so determinedly avoided Zhao Yunlan were now fixed on his back. There was a dark distance in that intense gaze. His expression held both a sort of restrained yearning and an affection that was almost palpable, but at the same time there was deep, crushing pain. How you gonna hit a bitch with that? Page fucking 53? Technically page 42? That's against the rules, woman. You can't do that. That's not allowed. And for good reason. What is this? Why are you trying to hurt my feelings? The fuck? Out of nowhere, Go Chang-chung got the feeling that the man had been... Stop it! Stop it! I can't say it because it's too early. But I dislike her at the very least. Out of nowhere, Go Chang-chung got the feeling that the man had been standing there for thousands and thousands of years. Shenwei watched Zhao Yunlan until he turned the corner, then finally noticed Go Chang-chung looking at him. A polite smile spread across the young professor's face. He put his glasses back on as if donning a nonchalant facade. He nodded at Go Chang-chung in acknowledgement, then disappeared into the elevator, as though everything Go Chang-chung had seen was only the misconception of an apprehensive young intern. There's something in there that I'm going to bring up later, but I can't talk about it quite yet, that makes an analogy I once made extremely, extremely apt. Where is it? Hang on. There we go. Sorry, it's like 3 words, but it's like 3 long words because of course they are. All right. Page number for posterity. Okay. That was the wrong page number. Director Zhao. That man, Haven't you realized that wherever this is, it's not the math department? Zhao Yunlan interrupted. He reached out to wipe the heavy dust on a windowsill, carelessly rubbing the dust between his fingers. We're being taken for a ride, he said evenly. Do you think it's a coincidence, or did that Shenla do it on purpose? Perhaps because Zhao Yunlan looked relatively young, or perhaps because his attitude had been easygoing and warm the entire time. Go Cheng gathered up enough confidence to ask, then why did you let him go? If he brought us here on purpose, why? With one hand holding his cigarette and the other back in his pocket, Zhao Yunlan turned and looked at Go Cheng through the swirling smoke. Go Cheng's mouth snapped shut. He's an ordinary human. I checked. You're new, so it's okay if you don't understand these things. We'll teach you as you go. Zhao Yunlan's voice lowered. In this country, we basically have the same authority as our colleagues in other departments. Even without proof, we can interrogate citizens, ask them to cooperate, suspect them, or even lawfully detain them and bring them in for questioning. But there's one thing above all that. We absolutely do not have the right to keep an ordinary man in a dangerous situation. If anything happened to them, the consequences would be more than anyone could bear. His tone wasn't harsh. Quite the contrary. He was speaking very gently. Perhaps it was the shadowy frigidity of the hallway that made Go Cheng shiver. Zhao Yunlan had already turned away. As you can probably imagine, the cases that come to us don't often go through the usual public prosecution procedures. Under certain circumstances, we have the right to deal with those particular wrongdoers on the spot. That kind of authority can be a dangerous thing, so there are rules we must abide by. Do you know what the first one is? Go Cheng shook his head slowly, then realized the other man had his back to him and hadn't seen. He flushed in fresh embarrassment. Whether dealing with a human or a ghost, without conclusive proof, you must assume they are innocent. Zhao Yunlan seemed to have eyes on the back of his head. Having answered his own question, he patted the black cat's rump. And you, big dumb fatty, what was all that earlier? You were sucking up like a stupid dog. The black cat swiped rudely at him and jumped out of his arms, then strode aggressively to stand in front of them. I just think there's something strange about that Shenla. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but being close to him makes me very comfortable. You also feel comfortable when you get close to wandering ghosts, and you especially love hiding dried fish in subterranean caves where corpses are hidden, Zhao Yunlan pointed out icily. You know that's exactly what I mean, dumbass human, said the cat disdainfully with a whip of his tail. Go Cheng had no idea how to respond. The hallway grew dimmer as they walked, as if they'd entered a dark, endless tunnel. Zhao Yunlan reached for his lighter. It lit with a flick, and the small flame danced restlessly, silently ripping a tiny hole in the boundless darkness. His smile had disappeared. In the firelight, his face had an unhealthy pallor, making him seem tired, but his gaze was intensely focused. Darker in a way than what surrounded them. A rotting smell came up from the depths of the darkness. Go Cheng couldn't help covering his nose. I hate circular halls like these, Zhao Yunlan said softly. I hate everything that circles around and around. Life and death, again and again, unending. Hearing that stretched Go Cheng's nerves as far as he could bear. And then there came a cracking sound, one that immediately made him think of the sound of a gun being cocked on TV. Before he could even ask, he felt the sudden sensation of a light exhalation over the back of his neck. He jumped. Get out of the way, Zhao Yunlan said, as calm as if he were holding a plate of hot dumplings, and asked someone to move over. Go Cheng had already flung himself to the ground, nearly wetting his pants. A gunshot rang out in the darkness. A piercing scream came from behind him. If he'd had fur, it would have been standing up more than Da-Ching's when someone touched the cat's butt. His heart beat with such ferocity that it seemed to echo in his chest. It felt as if he'd been terrified into a heart attack. As he sat on the floor, disheveled, he looked behind him. The weak glow of Zhao Yunlan's lighter showed a shadow on the wall the size of a 5 or 6-year-old child. At first glance, it might have been ink somewhere someone had smeared there. And at the center, in what would be its chest, there was a bullet wound. A pool of crimson was spreading from it in all directions, as if it were capable of bleeding. "What is that?" Go Chang asked. There was a shrillness to his voice that even he didn't recognize. "Just a shadow. Don't get worked up over nothing." Zhao Yunlan reached out and wiped at the black shadow. The blood-red substance began to flake off the wall at his touch, like old, damp paint. The shadow of what?" Zhao Yunlan paused, then snapped his head halfway around with a creepy smile. Go Chang could almost feel his soul being dragged in by the man's frighteningly black eyes. Then, in a bone-chilling whisper, Zhao Yunlan said, "You know, sometimes a person can have more than one shadow." Without a sound, Go Chang slid down the wall like a limp noodle. Zhao Yunlan was speechless. "It's all your fault." Da-Ching's tail stood straight in the air as he circled the unconscious Go Chang. This poor little intern was adding fainting into his daily routine. The cat flicked his tail unhappily. What good does scaring him unconscious do? "I didn't do it on purpose." Zhao Yunlan kicked Go Chang lightly. The intern slid down further against his leg with absolutely no reaction. Who knew this fellow was sound-activated and would faint from a few sentences? I figured at worst he'd piss himself or something. Da-Ching was pointedly silent. "That way, I could pay his bonus with adult diapers." Zhao Yunlan reached down, picked Go Chang up, and threw him over one shoulder. He looked like he was carrying a sack of potatoes that jostled with every step. His movements were nimble, but his tone was acidic. "Tell me, whose relative is this? And Tell me, whose relative is this that he just got shoved under my eyelids? What a pain." "Apparently an important leader who recently arrived in the ministry is this kid's uncle," Da-Ching said. Zhao Yunlan asked, expressionless, "Someone who just arrived? Doesn't he know the Special Investigations Department doesn't answer to the Ministry of Public Security? Sticking some mortal here with me. Does he want his nephew to earn the honor of perishing in the line of duty?" Da-Ching meowed. "Why didn't you say anything when the order came? What's the point of complaining at me now, you shameless kiss-up?" "Who cares if I'm shameless? What matters is not dying of hunger." Zhao Yunlan stubbed out the butt of his cigarette, slapping the kitty's head lightly. "Also, those of you who have nothing to do all day but pretend to be high and mighty, ask your conscience this. Where do you think your jobs, your pay and bonuses, the benefits during holidays, and even the right to do your work without being affected or disturbed by any other departments come from? Do you think they were blown in by the wind? Don't I have to go make those connections? What is shame? Can you eat it? Does it taste good?" Da-Ching, whose steady diet of imported cat food had gradually given him a more international body type, closed his mouth. "Besides, as soon as he was assigned, his name was on the soul guarding order. I thought he'd have some special powers. How was I to know the soul guarding order is as susceptible to politics as I am?" The black cat listened as he ran his mouth, but daring to joke about the soul guarding order was too much. Enough nonsense. The soul guarding order had existed since ancient times. It served to conduct netherworld business in the mortal world, act as a medium between yin and yang. Footnote: while yin and yang symbolize balance, the living are more associated with yang energy and the dead are more associated with yin energy. Really? Or is that world building? The three realms refers to the heavens, home of the gods, the mortal realm, home of the living, and the netherworld, home of the dead. Historically, it had fallen under the Imperial History Bureau. After the People's Republic of China was founded, the Soul Guarding Order came under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Public Security. That was when the Special Investigations Department had been established. The current director of the Special Investigations Department, Zhao Yunlan, was also the Guardian. This guardian was equally comfortable in the netherworld or in banquet halls. He was talented and smooth, able to hold his alcohol and exchange cups with anyone in the three realms. Eating, drinking, whoring, gambling, or putting on a show, he was an expert at it all. The old cat looked on coldly. If Zhao Yunlan hadn't had the dubious fortune of inheriting the soul guarding order, those skills alone would have been enough to guarantee him a bright and promising future. What happened in the hall just now? Da Qing, unable to bite the hand that fed him, could only cough dryly and change the topic. Why did your clarity watch sound the alarm like that? There's something following us, Zhao Yunlan said, but it ran when I shined the light on it. It probably isn't malicious. It's not the killer? No. Do you think I can't tell the difference between a newly formed ghost and something so tremendously evil? Zhao Yunlan lugged Go Cheng Cheng as he paced up and down the hallway. You saw the handprint next to the corpse, right? Bones thin as a match, fingers long as a whip. So far, I can't say for sure what it is, but I do know it's not human. This intern sure is solid. He weighs a ton. I have to dump him somewhere. As he spoke, Zhao Yunlan came to a corner and tossed Go Cheng Cheng down, but he still had enough conscience to not leave him for dead. Hiking his pants up, he squatted down and took a little bottle from his pocket. After pouring its contents in a circle around Go Cheng Cheng, he bit his own middle finger and smeared a drop of blood between Go Cheng Cheng's brows. The moment the blood touched Go Cheng Cheng's skin, it was completely absorbed. The poor intern's complexion improved at once. Having done all that, Zhao Yunlan gave Go Cheng Cheng a fierce smack on the head and cursed under his breath. Useless thing. Enough fooling around, Yunlan. Look at your watch. Zhao Yunlan glanced down just in time to see the face of his watch, Clarity, turn red again. A sharp yowl from beside his feet signaled him to follow Da Qing's gaze. An old woman, clad in her grave clothes, stood behind them. For all he knew, she'd been there for some time. As soon as her eyes met his, she turned to leave. But after only a few steps, she stopped again, as if wanting to lead them somewhere. This is the new ghost you were talking about? A new ghost out in broad daylight like this? Da Qing extended his stumpy legs and gave chase, meowing in complaint. Are you blind, you gay fool? Oh, gay fool is gonna have to be a thing. Zhao Yunlan hurried to catch up. Fuck off! Can't you see she can't speak? Literally writing it down. Can't you see there's still some life to her? Can't you see she's walking with two legs, not floating in midair? Who's the blind one here, big dumb fatty? Still bickering, they turned a sharp corner. The old woman disappeared. What she'd led them to was a flight of stairs heading to the roof. Da Qing sniffled and sneezed. What a massive amount of resentment. Bending down to pick him up, Zhao Yunlan said, It looks like it was her who brought us here, not Shen Lao-she. Maybe he really doesn't have anything to do with this. Let's go check it out. Carefully, they walked up. The stairs felt soft underfoot, as though made not from cement, but from some living thing, or rather countless living things that now reached from the shadows, clawing at whatever dared to enter their territory. But the moment they touched the hem of Zhao Yunlan's pants, they were thrown back. It's a given that every school is allotted a quota of suicides each year. As long as the number isn't higher than that, it's not a huge problem, Zhao Yunlan said. But I've heard that Dragon City University has had far too many for 3 years in a row. Most buildings here on the original campus are old and not very tall. Only the newer ones are high enough to guarantee no one can survive hitting the ground, so they're a magnet for suicides. The other buildings aren't so bad, but this building is where darkness and shadows converge. It's all corners inside, with lots of large L-shaped rooms and hallways, so once impurities are drawn in, they're stuck. Since they build up over time, a ton of resentment must be accumulated here. They reached the top of the stairs as he finished speaking. The small door to the roof was locked, with only a weak sliver of light managing to filter through. Zhao Yunlan took a transit card from his breast pocket, thrust it into the lock, and gently turned it. The metal door, nearing the end of its life, creaked open. Holding his lighter aloft, Zhao Yunlan slowly walked through. The roof of the 18th floor offered a wide view. Down on one side was Dragon City University's greenery, like an old-growth forest. On the other was the heavy traffic of cars and people crowding the city's main street. At the roof's edge stood a girl with her back to him. Image. Okay. Zhao Yunlan opened his mouth carefully. Hey. He'd barely begun to speak when she suddenly, with no warning, climbed over the railing and jumped. Out of sheer reflex, Zhao Yunlan lunged forward to grab her. By anyone's standards, it was a swift response. He clearly managed to catch the back of her clothes, but his fingers went right through. Then she was gone, as if she'd been nothing but a mirage. The cat bounced over like a rubber ball. What is it? Was it human? She was too fast. Zhao Yunlan subconsciously rubbed his fingers together. I didn't have time to figure out whether she was... Oh, art. Great. I'm not entirely sure I want to show it, actually. It's not, like, particularly violent. It's just certain types of images are very sensitive as to what you put in videos on YouTube and generally on the internet, so I'm going to err on the side of caution here. Zhao Yunlan had been born with his third eye open. Since childhood, he'd been able to see ghosts as plainly as he could humans, so a fleeting glance hadn't been enough to tell him whether she was human or something else. Before the cat could speak again, there were hurried footsteps behind them. Zhao Yunlan turned and recognized the same girl, now walking slowly up to the roof, head down. Her features were too blurred to make out her expression. Ghost stuck in a loop, then? This time, her pace quickened before he could get a single word out. She raced to the edge as if trying to beat the lunch rush to the cafeteria and flung herself over. Zhao Yunlan reached out and grabbed her shoulder, but the same thing happened again. His hand passed through her, and she vanished into thin air. After that, it was like jumping to your death was the latest craze. Girl after girl, each one blurry-faced and rushing as if to get to the market, appeared and then dashed to leap from the roof. Zhao Yunlan made grabs for all of them, but not a single one was corporeal. Beads of sweat began appearing on his forehead. At first, Ching was at Zhao Yunlan's side for each girl, but after the 8th jumper, the cat sat off to the side. His tail swished impatiently behind him, left to right like a pendulum. Give it up. These are either earthbound spirits or lingering consciousness from suicides here. Zhao Yunlan ignored the advice. He was strong in short bursts and had some martial arts training, so beating up the occasional thug wasn't a problem. But overall, years of poor habits and lack of exercise meant he wasn't all that fit. After only a few rounds, he was already a bit winded. The black cat sighed. One can be fooled once or twice, but not a third time. 8 times now, and you still can't tell she's not human? How do you know all 8 are the same person? Can you prove there's no human here but me? How do you know that when the next one runs out, we'll still be in the same physical space as we were a moment ago? Will you be able to discern whether or not she's human the moment she runs out? Remember, the 3rd regulation is never assume. Or did you gobble that one up with your cat food? Zhao Yunlan gave the cat a stern look. The black cat, who was often annoying and rude, twitched his tail sheepishly. Scolding me? He muttered. This old cat's lived for thousands of years, and you dare act like a boss and scold me, you brat? Zhao Yunlan erupted. If you don't shut up, I'm taking away your cat food. Daching was a cat who knew how to pick his battles. His tone changed at once. Meow. Just then a 9th jumper appeared. As soon as her face was visible, Zhao Yunlan yelled, Miss, wait! But the girl turned a deaf ear. Like all the others before her, she hurled herself toward Mother Earth like an arrow shot from the bow. Fuck! Once again, Zhao Yunlan's hands closed on nothing. He slapped the icy cold railing fiercely. Daching came closer and rested his front paws on the railing, sniffing carefully. Actually, what you're saying makes sense. Some earthbound spirits, like Aunt Shenglin, comes with a footnote. Aunt Shenglin is a famous tragic character from the story New Year's Sacrifice by Lu Xun. Forced to remarry after her first husband's death and later shunned as unlucky when her second husband and son also die. She notably tells the story of her sufferings repeatedly before her death when the town bars her from a New Year's sacrifice. In modern pop culture, she's used as shorthand for a naggy person. Damn. Some earthbound spirits, like Aunt Shenglin, relentlessly repeating her tales of woes, do reenact their deaths over and over again, but they're usually not in such a rush to die. Then what is it? Asked Zhao Yunlin. Resentment. Deching took on a solemn expression. No small feat for a cat with a face like a pancake. Suicide is a type of death seen as defying fate. There's a high chance that souls that die this way won't enter the reincarnation cycle. Even worse, some souls become incomplete when crossing the chasm between life and death, yin and yang. That leaves them wandering the mortal world long after they've forgotten how they passed on, confused even in death. Places where resentment is concentrated often make people feel uncomfortable, but can it actually hurt someone? Zhao Yunlan asked. I've never heard of a case like that. The cat paused. No, I've never heard of that either. But resentment is caused by incomplete souls. Like will consume like, and once they've reached I cannot fucking read today. Like will consume like, and once they've reached a certain amount of power, they can manifest physically. That's why I suspected the girl we saw was a manifestation of resentment from the shards of countless suffering, devoured souls. What can the physical form do? Nothing, really. Resentment isn't the same as evil. It's not as aggressive. Anyone can be misled or even hurt by resentment, is often guilty of something to begin with, said the cat. But these ghosts don't have the innate power to touch the victim's body, let alone slice her open. There's nothing to investigate here. Let's leave. Zhao Yunlan hesitated. The black cat sighed. When you should have some shame, it's like an alien concept for you. When you should be flexible, you're stubborn. The soul-guarding order has been passed down for millennia now. The regulations were reduced to nothing but a page of hollow words ages ago. Why do you keep clinging to them? No, I still think... Zhao Yunlan broke off. A 10th girl was approaching the roof. Human and cat tensed at the same moment. The girl's eyes passed over them, unseeing, as she slowly made her way to the railing. Like the 9 previous phantoms, she abruptly hoisted herself up onto the railing and jumped. But Zhao Yunlan, suspicious from the moment she appeared, made a lunge for her and got his arms around her waist. The sudden weight made the veins in the backs of his hands stand out. He'd caught a living, solid person. Green eyes wide with shock, the cat leaped onto the railing. Zhao Yunlan's hold on the girl was precarious. He couldn't bring all his strength to bear. In that position, holding on with only the strength of his arms, even a child would have felt heavy, never mind a grown adult. He had one leg jammed between the bars of the railing while the entire top half of his body dangled over. Hanging below the railing, the girl suddenly seemed to wake up. With an ear-splitting shriek, she reflexively began struggling. Zhao Yunlan could only yell in her ear, "If you keep squirming, you'll fall, and there'll be nothing left of you but a flat, dried persimmon. Settle down." A loud snap came from the railing. Perhaps it hadn't been repaired in years, or perhaps their weight was just too much for it, but regardless, it started to give way. Zhao Yunlan seemed oblivious, still talking to the girl. Don't worry, just hang on." Another snap rang out, interrupting him, as the railing finally broke. There was weird laughter by Zhao Yunlan's ear, like the roof was mobbed with people, spectators indifferent to his plight. They cackled, enjoying the show. Meow! Deching howled as if someone had... Meow! Deching howled as if someone had stepped on his tail. At that critical moment, as the railing fully collapsed, someone kicked the little door to the roof open. A figure rushed out in a blur of impossible speed. Zhao Yunlan had managed to shift his weight to his heels and lean back. He wrenched himself around with the girl still in his arms and shoved her toward the new arrival. Then he stepped wrong, his foot finding only empty air. One now free hand found a grip on the ledge, leaving him hanging from the 18-story building. Only then did Da Qing finally recognize that it was Shen Wei who'd burst onto the scene, long after they'd thought he'd left. Shen Wei immediately pushed the suicidal girl behind him, knelt, and grabbed the arm by which Zhao Yunlan was dangling. "Your other hand! Give me your other hand! Hurry!" That's the end of the chapter. And it's 5. And that's where we have to stop for today. We're on page 69 for chapter 4. Okay. Literal, the most literal cliffhanger we've ever had. In what has now been years of reading danmei. That is the most literal. Well then. What a lovely beginning. Lovely with an asterisk when it comes to, ghosts and touches of horror and sensitive topics. But still, what a great opening that we're now stuck in the middle of. I'm so excited. I miss this world so much. And I get to experience what I have forgotten all over again. But then I also get to learn all the new things that I just don't know. I'm deeply excited. I'm so excited. It's so good. Whew. So, it is after 5. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you had a lovely time, as lovely as I did. I missed Zhao Yunlan, I missed Shen Wei, I missed their ridiculous bullshit, and this is just so much fun. I host very queer reading streams on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 3 p.m. And, I'll see you in a couple of days. Please remember to take care of yourself. Bye, guys.